This is Shauna Louise Bunce Nelson. She worked as a 911 dispatcher where she met and fell in love with this man, Ken Nelson. At the time, he was a sheriff's deputy. Their story was rather traditional white picket fence stuff in the beginning. They married and had 2 children, but neither was really satisfied in their marriage, it turns out, and so there was more. Nelson met this man, another cop, Ignacio Garris. They would start an affair, though they were both married to other people. After some time, Nelson became pregnant with and gave birth to Garris's child. One problem, though. Garris did not want to raise the child with Nelson, and he did not want to leave his wife, Heather. So far, it sounds like a problem that's encountered often enough when folks take up affairs and get themselves involved in love triangles. I would bet dollars to donuts that there is currently a foursome somewhere in America going through the same story, maybe more than one. But this story is going to get dark, and it is going to take a lot of people down with it. Not the folks Nelson would have hoped, but several nonetheless. But let's wind it back just a few seconds. It was 1992 in Will County, Colorado, when Nelson became a dispatcher. She would begin dating Ken 3 years later and marry him in 1996. Once the children came along, she kept working her job. She liked the work, the pay, and she had some good friends there at the dispatch center. One of them was another sheriff's deputy, not Ken, not Ignacio, but this woman, Michelle Moore. Moore and Nelson were so close that Moore often babysat Nelson's kids. They went out for drinks together, sometimes with their coworkers. This still sounds like a rather average story of a rather average group of people, no? Well, hang in there because it's not. 2004 would come around and Nelson had been a dispatcher for 12 years. As governments often do to save some money and maybe be a little more efficient, Weld County's 911 services were consolidated with the services of the town of Greeley, Colorado. This is where things would begin to go down a bad road. Ignacio Garris was a detective with the Greeley police. She complained about her husband to him. He complained about his wife to her. You know, the usually run-up convo to an affair. And it didn't run up to an affair. It was pretty open around their work, which meant Ken found out about it pretty quick. Ken asked for a divorce. Okay, Nelson moved herself and the kids into an apartment. She hung with Moore and continued the shenanigans with Ignacio, who was never planning to leave Heather. In fact, he wanted that open secret of theirs to be much more closed. Hush up, nothing to see here. In July 2005, Nelson found out she was expecting Ignacio's baby. He said get an abortion. She said no. Instead, she went home to Ken and they tried to reconcile. Ken was willing to look past the pregnancy, even willing to adopt the baby as his own, loved the child as he loved his other children, and so a baby came in March 2006. Christian was the child's name, and Ignacio would sign over his rights to the boy in a courtroom just 9 months later. The story's a little more unusual now, but still not as unusual, or should we say twisted, as it's going to become. In January 2007, Heather would be leaving her work at a local credit union. She was standing in the parking lot, talking to coworkers and friends. It was evening, a little dark. Suddenly, someone dressed in a long black robe and wearing a Grim Reaper mask emerged from the shadows holding a gun. They told Heather to get on her knees. The attacker said, "You've ruined my life," before shooting Heather twice in the head. Heather died that night, leaving Ignacio and their daughter, just 9 years old, behind. Police arrived pretty quick, as you can imagine when a 911 call says that an officer's spouse has been shot. Witnesses would tell the officers that they were sure Nelson shot Heather. They told police that Ignacio had just broke things off with Nelson in front of Heather and had signed over rights to the son. They told police that Nelson was pissed. Nelson had been sending threatening messages to Ignacio. Quote, "You effed me. Be prepared." End quote. He left messages for Heather too. Heather was trying to work on her marriage though and did not take the voicemails too seriously. So a bolo goes out for Nelson. Ken was in the squad room when he heard his wife was suspected of murder. He went with his partner to their house. When he got close, he saw Nelson behind the wheel of his truck and stopped her. He yelled at her to get out of the vehicle, and Greeley police would soon show up to arrest her. They found the Grim Reaper mask under the front seat of the truck. She denied it all, of course. She said she was just going to buy some wine. "Nothing to see here," she told them. Moore would also say she knew nothing when interviewed by police. She would go a little into unbelievable territory when she claimed Nelson had no beef with Heather. Moore would not get away unscathed, though. She was arrested just as Nelson was going to trial. Why? For conspiracy to commit first-degree murder and criminal attempt to commit first-degree murder. Her tune changed when she was interviewed this time, though, and she spilled the tea like it was burning her. Moore knew what Nelson was planning to do, suggested leaving misleading evidence at the scene, leave someone else's DNA just all over the important clues. The confession would delay Nelson's trial because, hello, new damning evidence. And damning evidence that would be. Moore's evidence tied it all together. It was now clear why Nelson was wearing Ken's clothes that night, why she left men's shoes at the scene, why she was driving Ken's truck, even though she hated driving that truck. Nelson would tell the court that she and Moore were lovers, and Moore ratting her out was nothing more than her being upset that Nelson broke up with her. She would look at the jury and with a mostly straight face say, "I couldn't keep lying to Ken." Moore would say no, there was no sexual relationship. She helped a friend figure out how to kill a woman she had issues with, and then tried to pin that on another person. It was perfect for Nelson, right? The plan? No more Ken, he's in prison. No more Heather, she's dead. So Ignacio would have no more excuses. And they could all go on and live happily ever after. The only thing that stood in the way of that was Moore's confession, and the jury. It would not take them long to come back with a verdict of guilty to first-degree murder, and she was given the max, life without parole. Moore would be sentenced later in March 2008, 9 years jail, 3 years mandatory parole to follow. She pleaded to accessory to a crime rather than plotting to commit murder. That sentence seems pretty fitting. She's released now and living her life. Ken is divorced now and living his life as well. He's raising all 3 kids and says he plans to arrange visits between Nelson and the kids. Nelson would appeal and lose her appeal. She's living out her life at Denver Women's Correctional Facility. As far as Ignacio goes, well, he resigned from the Greeley Police Department and moved with his daughter to Florida. In the end, those that lost the most in all of this were Heather and 4 children, whose lives would be changed irreparably. Until next Thursday, thank you for listening. If you're enjoying these videos and want more, don't forget to subscribe and turn on your notifications so that you don't miss any videos. Thank you for watching. We really appreciate it.